Anyway, I don't know. Go ahead.
Welcome to our workshop meeting today. It's November 19th, 2025, and the time is 6:50. I now call this meeting to order. Madam Board Clerk, please do the roll call.
Miss Naomi Gleason Marquette, President. Mr. Jamar Cummings, President. Miss Eleanor Jerenza, Present. Mr. Creedy.
Present.
Please
Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a sheet for citizens comment?
Think about it. It's just me. Kim, this Kim. Okay. It's only two. Thank you.
We're moving to the citizens comment. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to convene the public comment period of a meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold comment periods, we have chosen to do so because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from the community members about concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns and questions tonight. This is because we take our concerns and questions seriously and want to have sufficient time to process and research issues if need be. We will, however, respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have proper staff members get back to you at the appropriate time. I also want to point out that under state and federal privacy laws, we are unable to entertain any comments or questions about school personnel. Please know, however, that we take personnel concerns very seriously. On these matters, we would ask you to go through the appropriate administrative channels. All right.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Ma. My name is Kim Popkin. I'm the president of the Poughkeepsie Public School Teachers Association. On the agenda for tonight's workshop meeting is the New York State 338 and Regents test scores. We felt compelled to make a statement tonight acknowledging that our current test scores are below grade level benchmarks, but we also wanted to provide important information and historical context about the challenges inherent in these assessments and within our classrooms. Our goal is to ensure that the full picture is presented and understood as we continue to work together to support our students' academic and social emotional growth. The New York State grades 338 assessments and Regents exam have long faced criticism for several key shortcomings. These tests often place excessive emphasis on high stakes outcomes, which can narrow curriculum and pressure schools to teach to the test rather than support deeper learning. Many questions are criticized for being developmentally inappropriate, unclear, or misaligned with classroom instruction. The exams also fail to fully measure important skills such as creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking, instead prioritizing rigid standardized formats. Additionally, test results frequently arrive too late to meaningfully guide instruction, limiting their usefulness for teachers and students. Together, these issues raise concerns about the fairness, validity, and educational value of the current testing system. Standardized tests provide only a narrow snapshot of a student's abilities. They measure how well a student performs on a specific type of task on a single day. They do not capture creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, or the many ways students can demonstrate understanding. As a result, standardized testing fails to reflect the full range of a student's strengths, potential, and overall learning. Although the New York State Education Department is phasing out the need to pass the Regents for graduation through the Portrait of a Graduate, They have done nothing to look at the 3 through 8 tests and the flaws that exist within them, nor to make substantive changes that are necessary. The New York State grade 3 through 8 math, ELA and math assessments remain excessively long for the age group taking them. Many students continue to spend several hours or even an entire day completing each exam, leading to fatigue, stress, and decreased engagement. These extended testing periods raise concerns about student well-being and whether the results accurately reflect their abilities. Additional consideration and support are needed to ensure the testing experience is developmentally appropriate and manageable for all students. Our 3rd through 8th grade students can spend more time taking the New York State assessment than a 9th through 12th grader spends on a Regents exam. State tests alone cannot capture the full range of a student's abilities, growth, or potential. To truly understand and support our learners, we must look at the whole child, their academic progress, social emotional development, creativity, and daily classroom performance. As educators and community members, we have a responsibility to examine our own practices and ensure that they align with what is best for students. Our New York State United Teachers Union has been advocating for these changes for many years, but we must join our collective voices with the School Boards Association and School Administrators Association to change our flawed testing system. We recognize that our test scores are low and that the information we offer here tonight is not to provide an excuse for that particular measure, but rather to take the opportunity to deepen the conversation as we collaborate to improve student achievement. We must move with the urgency of now and collectively advocate at the state level for change, using our shared voices to push for assessment systems that are developmentally appropriate, equitable, and reflective of the diverse strengths of our Poughkeepsie students that our Poughkeepsie students bring to school each day. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments at this time? Mr. Mai, you're on to present the workshop topics.
Thank you, Board President, for this opportunity. Good evening, Poughkeepsie City's community. We have 2 presentations tonight as part of our workshop meeting this evening. One will focus on our grant activities. We have a special guest, Mr. Alexander Lucas, who will present some findings of an audit that was completed for duration of the 2021-24 years with emphasis on 23-24. He will be supported by our Executive Director of Business, Ms. Holly Sanford. If the two of you can make your way to the microphone and position yourself accordingly. And once Mr. Lucas makes his presentation on some of the audit findings, Ms. Sanford will present to the board and community corrective action plan steps that will be taken in order to correct and improve upon the findings. At the conclusion of the finance department presentation, we will conclude these workshop topics this evening with a presentation from members of our Division of Instruction, giving an overview of our 3 through 8 2024-25 state assessment results. That will be led by our Director of Data Accountability Assessment, Ms. Lisa Spencer-Perry, and then our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Ms. Jessica Turner, will speak briefly on some of the practices, the foundation that's been laid to date, our path we're working on this year, or our goals and objectives, and our future plans for working to improve outcome for students here in Poughkeepsie. In that order will be the presentation for tonight. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to the business department. Ms. Holly, if you don't mind, just giving an introduction again to Mr. Lucas, and Mr. Lucas, you have the microphone. Thank you. Make sure your microphone.
Mr. Lucas did an internal audit of our grants finance. Like Mr. Mott has said, this is not current data that we're reviewing. It's mostly from the 23-24 school year.
So first off, I would like to thank the superintendent and the board for having me here tonight. As the man Holly said, my name is Alex Lucas. I'm an analyst from the Bonadeo Group, the district's internal auditors. And as part of the state required internal audit project, every year, the district is required to have a deep dive into a specific area. And we were engaged in December of 2024 to look into the grants management project as it stands throughout Poughkeepsie City School District. And the main point is our period of review was from July 1st, 2021 in through December 31st, 2024, given that that was the extensive period of most of the grants activities. The primary focus was on the activities during the fiscal year 2023 to 2024. The reason for the back look to 2021 is to accurately reflect some of the activities from ARP and ESSER funding. And so while most of our selections were based upon the most recently completed fiscal year, there were a number of selections that looked back to go and try to get a more historical understanding of different aspects. Our testing involved a wide variety of established parameters. Principally, we began with a policy and procedures overview and tried to establish what board-related policies intersect with grants management, as well as looking at the internal processes that were in place at the time the grants were managed and looking for any possible deficiencies or improvements there. The next key aspect was reviewing what the state considers FS10 budget forms. And essentially what those are is, it is a itemized listing of various different sub-project codes that each grant will fund. And so, for example, there's a specific section in each one that denotes professional salaries, support staff salaries, goods, services, different benefits for employees, all of which are itemized under different line items and present on each initial budget grant. Our key aspects were to make sure that the district had adequate support for all the filed grants budgets on file, that everything was certified correctly, that all the data matched up based upon that, and that there was necessary amendments to said budgets filed during the fiscal years applicable. On top of that, for each completed grant, we also looked at the FS10F form, with the F signifying that is a final cost report, and each grant is supposed to have its own unique FS10 budget establishing it prior to the grant period. And at the conclusion, an FS10F has to be created, which establishes what the grant actually paid for. And it includes itemized listing of salaries for specific individuals. It includes itemized listings of specific check or journal entries, noting what payments were correspond to funds for the purpose of the grant. And it provides a very detailed overview and a way to establish a budget actual variance to what was initially approved by the state to what the final cost reports by the district were. Our key concern here was to go and review the top line budget to actual variances, the grants themselves, and identify any significant issues there, as well as to look if there was any state required amendments that need to be filed in the form of an FS10A. To go and support that not just the initial paperwork was set up, but that the grant was administered correctly, we did two subsequent detailed reviews of both payroll for professional and support salaries, as well as goods and services, and did a number of detailed review on the amounts paid to said individuals, as well as documentation reviews. And for the goods and services, that necessary packets were in place, that there was sufficient documentation to go and look back upon, and that everything tied out to the FS10Fs as reported to New York State. For the policy and procedures review, we reviewed a number of different board policies, namely 6-700 for purchasing, the purchasing authority that is granted by the board to the district, as well as contracting for professional services. And we noted no issues with these policies. However, the one thing we did find during the overall procedure review was there was no formal policy for handling grants per se, but this is not necessarily unique to Poughkeepsie as a school district. This is actually very common to not have a board level policy. But in terms of the procedural side, there were a lot of inconsistencies and issues with overall grants and management at the time period of our audit. Since then, there were several other positions created, including grants coordinator, whose specific job is to now oversee said grants, as well as trying to further clarify what the directors and grant managers are supposed to review and have oversight on. And so some of our, while it was not a formal recommendation and we do not need to do district file corrective action plan on these set items specifically, the lack of a strong internal process was something that we did note during the course of our findings. With regards to establishing the budget for all of the FS10 grants that were on file, these were specifically for grants that were active during the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 school year. And we noted several key findings, principally of which that 2 of the grants, the district did not have their original FS10 budget on file for our review. 10 grants had either incomplete documentation when provided, incorrect project codes, incorrect dated approvals, or names that varied from from the initial budget to the final report. And when I say that the name varies, it's very minor aspects. There's multiple Title I grants, for example, but they all have very slight differences in their name and project code, and just any inconsistency like that, we made note of during the course of our audit. Our testing noted 5 separate cost centers that the district overspent its budget by 10%. Under state regulations, when those occur, a FS10A, an amendment to the original budget, is required to be filed. And with each cost center, each grant has 10 different budget lines on cost centers. And if any one of those, or the grant itself, is overspent by the lesser of $1,000 or 10%, a FS10A is required to be filed. And in this case, we noted 5 areas in which an amendment should have been filed to correct that issue. In addition, while not a explicit issue by the district, we noted that 32 cost centers of the grants were underspent by budget target or by the budgetary target by 10%, meaning that there were significant funds that were not spent in previously awarded areas within the grant. On the top line, look at 11 grants were underspent by 1%. 8 of those 11 grants were underspent by 10%, and 3 of the ones you looked at were underspent by 25%. And just as clarification, an FS10A amendment does not need to be filed for underspent budgets. But one of the key things with our review of this was identifying any large budget to actual variances in the process. And so the district was not required to file any budgetary amendments, but it should take further consideration into ensuring that grants are spent up until the awarded amount. With regards to the detailed testing of these grants in particular, we reviewed 25 salary-based claims across the grants, and these specify the names of individuals. It lists out the exact dollar amounts that they were paid from the grants. And as part of our testing, one of the aspects was to go and ensure that no one was claiming to be more than 1 full-time equivalent across the grants in the period. We didn't note any of them during our testing. We did note, however, upon selections of different employees, that there were some key documentation that were missing that we were expecting the district to have on file. One employee had their name misspelled on one of the final cost reports. And that in terms of the financial accounting for the district, we didn't note a clear and easily identifiable way to necessarily trace all the payments to the individuals from the overall grants management from the district's accounting software. And while the total amounts did end up tying up and there were no issues from a monetary standpoint, it was more of an issue of overall ease of identification of being able to note that these line items are coming from this grant and paid this individual. In addition to that, the next section of our review was regarding purchased goods and services. And we had noted one instance in which the amount on the final cost report was not agreeing to the amount of the financial software, and was a discrepancy in the check that was issued to the vendor at that point. We did note that there were several instances in which there were either missing purchase orders on records, or they were missing invoices to support the claims made on the final cost report, and constituted a lack of overall organization of some of the key items needed for retention or for document retention in the accounts payables purchasing process. As part of our review, we always issue a number of recommendations, some of which require a corrective action plan and some do not. But the items present here are ones that we expect the district to have a corrective action plan for. And most principally to have a fully documented internal way of establishing the responsibilities of the grants coordinator position to ensure that they have proper oversight of grants, that they are properly communicating with those who initially request grants, and have full documentation available to them to go look back at historical records of prior grants. One of the key items is to establish a standardized review method for FS10 budget to actual review, and to have a proper document retention plan so that future review of initial budgets is easily accessible, is easily identifiable, and is able to be reviewed by either an external party such as myself, external auditors, or future members of the finance office. We hope that this would spur the create consistency between naming FS10s and FS10Fs in codes, names, and organizations. As noted previously, there are a number of grants that have very similar names, that have very similar project codes, but because of which led to some confusion with properly trying to segregate and identify which grant was which due to inconsistencies between the budget and final cost report. Principally, and one of the higher points of importance with the report is monitoring cost centers within grants to ensure that any overspending for possible grants usage is responded with an amendment filed for that grant to ensure that funds are properly allocated from the initial overspent location and is covered from a separate area there. The next aspect being that on the employee side, ensuring that all employees' documents are provided at onboarding and properly retained by the district and able to be reviewed at any point. And for purchases and accounts payable, ensuring that there is accurate and sufficient documentation packets available for each transaction for the required period of time. Not listed on here are items that we do not consider to be required corrective action plan. They were just items for improvement, such as further outlining of the overall grants process, developing strong procedures, and principally with underspending budgets, trying to have a stronger budget actual review by each individual budget overseer in coordination with the grants coordinator. With that, I believe that concludes my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, for that thorough overview of the audit from the 21-24 school year with emphasis on 23-24. Before we get into the Q&A, board members, I do believe Ms. Sanford, I appreciate what she has done since she has joined the district. Going to speak to a lot of those recommendations that Mr. Lucas spoke to. This action plan that's she's preparing to present has been articulated to the responsible parties to ensure that these findings are corrected moving forward. If you can note your questions and hopeful that at the conclusion of Ms. Sanford's presentation, we can go into our Q&A period that Mr. Lucas and Ms. Sanford can collectively address. Ms. Sanford, sorry, right.
Good evening. My name is Holly Sanford. I am the executive director in the business office, and we put together a corrective action plan, and we wanted to just go over briefly, just like a high level overview of some of the forms that were mentioned in the corrective action plan and in the audit report, so that there's just a clear understanding, because we're going to use this corrective action plan as procedural guidance. Because the board is going to be approving it, so that kind of satisfies one of the findings that was in the audit report, that we don't have anything that's designated just for grants finance management. So
Can you move the mic just a little bit closer?
louder.
Just a little closer. Thank you.
Okay, so if we go to the,
Speaking to.
okay, most of the solutions to the findings are just, more oversight and more review by both the business office and the program managers. And also the assistant superintendents are going to be reviewing before they're finally reviewed by, Mr. Mott as the chief administrative officer who signs all of the estimates. So if we go to the next slide, this is just an example of what our financial reporting looks like. So you can see the way that all these FX10s, these forms affect our financial reporting. So the column that has, these are fake numbers just for the sake of making things simple so you can understand. So in the budget column, that's reflecting the FS10 that gets sent to the NICEAG, well, whatever, the grant legislator is going to be. Once they approve it, comes back to us, and then we appropriate F codes. So it's a separate fund from our general fund balance, so we can charge expenses to the F codes instead of our general fund. So that's the first part, is the FS10. That's our initial budget that we're presenting spending to the state. Once they approve it, then we have these codes set up and they're available to spend. So one of our issues was timing. So if we don't have these codes established before programs start, then we're incurring expenses like payroll and salaries, and we don't have anywhere to charge. And then, or if there's contractual expenses that need to be paid, we don't have codes to charge them to, and then that kind of interrupts the flow of having to open the purchase order and capture all of the spending for a complete year. Then we miss time in the beginning. So then the second two rows are representing what happens when you file an FS10A, when we file an amendment. So in this situation, we realized that we didn't have to spend as much on supplies as we anticipated in the beginning of the grant, and so we want to move the money up to contractual. So if we aren't timely with our accounting end of that form, we may not have the funds available on the contractual account. So we'll have underspending in the contractual account because we can't establish a purchase order unless the funding is available. So if we try to open up a purchase order for $2,500, but we didn't reflect it to FS10A, we were not going to be able to do that. It'll sit as a requisition and sometimes gets lost. And then after the grant period is over, a purchase order was never created, and then now we have to absorb it into the general fund because the purchase order needs to be dated within the grant period. So it's just like some accounting and documentation that needs to be done timely in order to make sure that we can maximize all the spending. And then the FS10F is where we're taking all of our actual expenses and what's encumbered and adding them together and reporting that to the state for reimbursement to say this is what we actually. So the timing here, the FS10Fs are usually due within 1 month of the grant period's end. And a lot of our title grants especially have the same grant period. So the FS10s are all Excel templates. So there's a little bit of a risk of maybe like mistransposing a budget code or the names are pretty similar. So when a grants coordinator is sending out, 15 or 16 of the same form, it's really easy to maybe not mistype one letter or something like that. And that is kind of important because we're sending it all to the same place. And then we can have it rejected or it confuses our reporting too online. When we go on to NICEAG, we can look up our district and see how much we were allocated, how much spending we've incurred, and how much has been awarded to us. And if we are timely, then it makes it look like we have no spending. Like we were given all this money, but we didn't spend any of it. So we just want to make ourselves a little bit more responsible fiscally. So that's just to kind of explain what the relationship is between program budget forms that are being sent to the state and then what it should look like in our accounting software. And that's like one of our findings too, is that there were variances from what we have in our accounting software and what was being sent to the state. And that also can be because of different versions of the FS10. People change their minds, about programs or salaries, who's gonna be charged to what code, or some things change with personnel all the time. So our response to, this is our corrective action plan, so these are the findings in the first column. This is something that we're gonna have printed out in our business office so that we use as a reference guide. Our findings that required, a response are in the left column. Our corrective action is in the middle, and our responsible party is on the right. The first three are mostly documentation, except for the first one of that timeliness. A lot of this is going to be resolved by just having more oversight. And another thing that was done more recently, I think at the last board meeting, there was a restructure. And it kind of overlaps now, the assistant superintendent's overseeing parts of our grants. So community school is now under Ms. Turner. Dr. Palmer oversees all of our 611, 619 grants, and we work together now, the business office and program for the assistant superintendents and their staff. And the program managers for community schools are working together and then having layers of oversight and review before they end up going to Mr. Mott for final signature. Before it was like a little bit more of a siloed working situation, so this should help with the communication. You know, like a lot of these solutions are really simple. We just have to communicate and have a more structured way of communicating information. And also it gives us an opportunity to review too if we're on time to make sure that we're spending everything that's in our grants. So not having an FS10 on file, we just didn't have a copy here as a documentation issue. It was filed with state and we were able to see that when we log into our portal. But this is just a matter of not having all of our documentation in one place. No signature and incorrect project codes, that's going to be, you know, we're hoping that that's going to be resolved by just having more oversight. And it won't just be one person looking at each FS10, we're gonna have the assistant superintendent, so they're only gonna be looking at a few as opposed to all of them. We're gonna have more meetings, so that way we can monitor our spending. We did update community schools anyway. A couple of the program managers didn't have access to all of their budget codes and Envision. So that's already been corrected so that they can look at Envision and watch the spending, make sure that our spending is what they would expect. We have to do a state aid reconciliation report for our external audit anyway, and we also have a single audit too, which is over federal funding. So that's a template that's, you know, BOCES provides that, and that should be prepared by our district. So we're gonna start being a little bit more proactive with that too, and have that prepared before our external audit, and then that will help us to reconcile our grant money as well, so we can just turn that over to whichever auditor asks for it. The Envision access, we can address that in the business office, that's easy for us to fix as long as, we don't need to go externally for that, as long as they have a login that's issued by our rec center. And then one of our other comments, this is on the, oh, I'm sorry, can you skip one more page?
I think that was it.
That was it? Oh, I'm still talking. I'm on the last page. Just, yeah, the last one. I still have a little bit more to go. So the first finding on the top of the last page, this is talking about our salaries that are charged to the grants, but we should be doing all of our reporting timely enough so we can establish a payroll purchase order. So that if there's a salary charged into the grant, we can have them set up to charge automatically when we clock in or when we put in their time cards directly to the grant. And sometimes that doesn't happen, so we charge them to the A fund and then do a journal entry to move it over. So there was 2 comments about our journal entries. One was that we just weren't putting enough of a description so that it was easy to tie out and find out who that journal entry was addressing and which salaries it was addressing. And missing I-9s, that's something that we have to work with our HR department when we onboard people. And then there's also a form that we can print out as individual. It's called a payroll verification report. And I've been asked for that by other auditors before too. Serves as a voucher. So it's just a form that comes out every salary, every individual paid from federal grant has to sign it, acknowledging that they're being paid out of the grant. And that is kind of like an attestation. So that way we can document that they're actually getting paid and that they're acknowledging and signing up on it. And it's something that's often required anyway. We should be doing that at least twice a year. So we'll start adding that to our list of things to do. And then the last part is the discrepancy between the final reports and what's reported in our software. But that I think will be a little bit more easy to manage when we have all these layers of review, so we'll know which version of the FS10 we should be using, because it's going to have the business office's signature on it, the assistant superintendent's signature, and then finally Mr. Mock's signature. So we'll know that that's our official document that we have to use. The missing invoices and purchase orders, that will be something that we can address with our timeliness. As long as we have time to do that ahead of time, and then have the project managers monitoring throughout the grant period. And then we do keep binders, like paper binders for all of the grants, so we'll just add the journal entries with backup for documentation, and that is what.
Thank you, Ms. Sanford. So, board members and community, which you heard, was our, action steps that are in place to correct the findings from the audit, many of which, simple to do as shared by Ms. Sanford. At this point in time, that concludes the presentation. If there are any questions, facilitate the board or the question answer period.
Thank you for your presentation. I did have a question about just ways to engage technology more. My question was, do you feel like your team has adequate technology or software to mitigate some of this human error? Because I see a lot of humans that are in charge of being responsible for catching errors, but how is your software catching these errors? Or is it?
The software only knows what we tell it, so the kind of, we're limited because what we have to use to communicate to the state is actually paper. It's a paper form, so we have to enter data into our software. So it's nothing that our software can fix. I think it'll be fixed through communication and oversight. But our software works great.
Any other questions?
Actually, I had a question about the software too, mainly because when Mr. Lucas was giving this presentation, some things weren't jiving with the software. So my question was, is the software adequate for our purposes here? One thing I did notice, between this audit and the last audit that we had, two things is the clerical errors, like the human errors and a lot of this financial reporting. And then the second is like timeliness. Those seem to be like the two common, and not to like bash the department or anything, but the two common themes since I've been here when it comes to audits and things is timeliness and a lot of clerical errors. I'm from a person who worked in finance for 5 years. I was a financial analyst. I always like it when there's less people involved in looking at things, because if you give 5 people 5 spreadsheets, maybe like the superintendent and assistant superintendent, I know they're not saying that you're not going to, but I don't know, we can expect them to look at like this cost center and know that they're correct, right? So how do we, I don't expect them to be the oversight of the clerical errors, right? How do we avoid these clerical errors moving forward? Because I don't think our superintendents have enough time to look at these reports and make sure that they're all correct.
That's very true. We've started already with the 24-25, the final reports. This is Mr. Martin started requiring the business office to review before he'll sign off on any of the final reports. And I know, I understand what you're saying about having too many hands touching financial data, because then, like that increases our risk for error. But with the the grants, we need to have the program managers, because us in finance, we don't know what their needs are, and we don't know if we're spending on the right things. You know, if it's salary, it's a little bit more, that's okay, but, so the assistant superintendents are gonna be really helpful for that, because they'll be able to look and say, oh, you know, we wanted these contracts or these services that I'm not aware of, you know, like, I don't know what they mean or what they do.
Right, so they can direct where we're gonna apply the money, and where the money's gonna be spent, but like, how do we, I'm really more concerned about like the clerical errors
Yeah,
that come with.
that's gonna be, well, I'm not gonna say that we're solving everything, but it's going to help to have the business office review first. Before it goes to, I mean, we changed almost all of our financial reports for the finals for 24-25. Almost all of them got, and it was great because the grant period was, 9/1 to 8/31. And our fiscal year is 7/1 to 6/30, so we had that month where we were able to journal entry some expenses back into the grant so that we could, you know, maximize our spending. Otherwise, we would have just lost that money just because of, you know, not taking advantage or not being mindful of the spending throughout the year and just noticing it at the end. So that's the piece, I guess, is that there are people who are non-financial that are initiating the budget, and then people who are only financial that are closing the budget. So there's like this like missing piece in the middle. And so that's where we're gonna try to work on reviewing a little bit more and spending more time, making sure that when our initial budget is put into Envision, that we have purchase orders in there. So like on it's not up anymore, but when we had that financial report up, there was a column, there was budget adjustments, final budget, and then there was expense or encumbrances there too. So really, we should have everything encumbered really close to the beginning of the grant period. And then if there's a change, like we would need to know about it, so that way we could liquidate that purchase order. Otherwise, it just stays encumbered, and maybe a contract isn't able to comply with our procurement policy, and we don't end up spending, but we just have it encumbered there, we won't know. So that's why the assistant superintendents and the program managers are really important to us, because then they can tell us, and then we'll do the accounting part of it.
And the last question, is there a mechanism for tracking the grants and how much is being spent throughout the year, so that we know that, hey, if we're gonna have 20,000 unspent, and let's, you know, where can we use it? Is there a tracking mechanism? Does the grant coordinator track as the grant money is being spent, so we know where we're at?
We have that appropriation status report, and that's what we would use to track our spending, and that has our expenses and encumbrances. That's really the only tool that I know of that we can use, but it should be sufficient as long as we're drilling down inside of each account and seeing what's inside.
And that's how often do we see that, like internally, that's it?
I can see it whenever I want to.
I mean, but like the people who, the grant coordinators and like Ms. Palmer or whoever's community school grant coordinator, like, are they able to see that? Okay.
Yeah, access to it, and that's something that's on our, you know, like that's one of the areas that we want to improve with is meeting, you know, before the grant is over, and making sure that everything is where it's supposed to be before the grant closes, and then we can't make any more adjustments.
Is that something that we do at the beginning of this year, with our grant coordinators, like figuring out what our goals are and how we're gonna spend the money for the city?
That's part of what the program manager does. It kind of lists out what the purpose is of each grant, how the money will be used, supplies, salary, contracts that will be awarded to support the program, et cetera. So each department head should be tracking each component, because they drafted how the funds will be used.
The program managers are also the ones that initiate requisitions too.
Yeah.
For payment, so it's originating from their departments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a few. All right, in regards to the grant coordinators, who are mainly the grant coordinators? Are they, is it several or one or two, or the,
We have one.
that's gonna be the.
Well, no, we have one, and I'm glad you asked that question. So each of the grants may have a department head who may draft narrative of how the grants should be used. We recently hired a grant coordinator to facilitate and monitor each of the grants. And then we have a third party here. We're now gonna have our executive director of business following up as well with that grant report coordinator reporting to the executive director that he, keeping the business on that.
So the grant coordinator, are they also do coordination with being the FF10 budget?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I wanted to understand the difference between, because I understand the F10, but the FS10, I'm saying, right, the FS10,
So
FF, yeah,
I
10,
think FS stands for financial statement,
right.
right? Is it financial statement and then 10 because there's 10 different categories? Or maybe not, I'm not sure. It sounds.
Oh, yeah, I think that, right, because I wanted to know that, yeah, thank you, do both of them.
So the the FS10 is the original budget.
Right.
And then the FS10A is their amendment that we would.
Gotcha.
Changes, and then the FS10F is their final expense report.
Okay, okay. In regards to the report, what did we overspend? And the course, because you said, sir, I'm sorry, what is your name again? I'm sorry.
Alex.
Alex, you had said that we had overspent, so do you know if we overspent, what was the,
I don't have the data in front of me
Okay.
right now for which specific grants or cost centers were overspent. It was just upon the review of the 20 grants from the 23-24 year, there were 5 that were overspent by 10%.
and in regards to the audit board, the record and how they properly maintained, Mr. Mock or, you know, who oversees the onboarding so that when we get our employee records that they are documented properly, would that be the executive now?
No, it will still be our business
Okay.
office, especially most of the oversight is going to be done by the business office and in collaboration with the department head who responsible for facilitating that.
Right. So I think you did have the corrective measure for documenting the purchases on a grant and making sure they are properly, you know, documented. Okay, that was the corrective measure.
In the corrective action plan, yeah, yeah, but we did. So we have to, the I-9, I think that's like something that we, well, during onboarding.
Right.
So we'll have to work together with, human resources to make sure that we.
Right, that's the part I was, well, that's exactly what I was referencing to, because I want to make sure the documentation, that we don't have these recurrent errors.
Good.
Okay, also, yeah, I think that's about it. That's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
It's not fun being the board member, I can't ask all the questions up front. An observation. At no point in the audit did it say how much money we were looking at. How many employees there were. We just saw the movements of the audits. Where like, I'll pick one that always fails, the student activity funds always fails, always missing documentation. But we know it's like $40,000. And so we sit here for all this time, and I have no idea how many projects, the magnitude, is it 100 or millions of dollars, number of employees, some sort of anchor, so we can look at what we're conceptualized, what we're absolutely talking about. And like the old rule of thumb, you know, where do we stand against the administrative spend versus whenever you get a grant, they usually ask you about the administrative, keeping it under X. And I didn't have any perspective on what we were talking about from a financial personnel thing. So the next time, maybe we could just have a summary chart at the beginning to say how big,
I'm not sure.
what were we looking?
Those are varying.
You know, size,
Each grant has, it's very different. And so-
yeah, but I mean, but just somewhere that we could ground it to what we were discussing.
I hear you. I think that's something also we may consider in our audit committee, more specifically details, place there.
And also in our treasurer's reports too. We can, you know, that used to be part of the deliverable that I would go the.
Couple Venn diagrams,
Yeah,
you know,
or even the appropriation status report for the F fund. you might want to see that, and then you'll get to see how much each grant, you can look at what we're looking at.
I did have one more, just quick question about timesheets. I know currently the district is reliant on paper timesheets for a lot of workers in these grant programs. There's a big point of error where each time you fill out a timesheet, but the actual worker has to fill out their code. Is there a way to automate that? I know there are some processes that you can't automate, but that seems like one that could be tagged easily to mitigate that error of someone just marking down the wrong code.
Yeah.
What they're looking.
If the salary is paid 100% out of their math code, we can set it up so that it's automated, so when they're clocking in and out, then. But a lot of the grant positions, they're extra, they have a contractual, payment that they get for being, whatever their position is, in general instruction for the school during the day, and then a lot of the grants are just additional programs that are supplementing our regular instruction, so after school programs, things like that, where they need to stop charging to the A fund code and then start a new code. That's the reason why we're relying on paper for that, because we don't want to charge their salary to the A fund. So yes, it's fresh, we just did payroll today, so we do have Timepiece. We have another software that interfaces with our accounting software, and I know that we can do a lot more with it than we are doing, and it's new to me. This is my first district that I've ever done, clocking in and out, like typically, because we're all annualized salaries. We don't, or well, smaller districts don't have to clock in and out, but we have different things going on. So yes, we're gonna try to automate as much as we can.
Or like issuing a label or something, like, this month, this set of people get literally a printed label or something with a code on it, so you don't have to write it out by hand. I mean, it's just
Even on the time sheet had it already written.
have it already written like a stack. Here's the timesheets for you guys in this group, and it has it already, with a sticker with a fund on there. I understand people could then make an error and keep their timesheet or charge to the wrong code, but it could mitigate some error, something like that.
Yeah, or even to have the program manager have them on filled out.
Correct. And then you just are responsible for noting your time and signing.
Get it printed out and copy those things, that's what I do.
All right, if there's no further questions, thank you for the
Mr.
presentation.
Lucas,
Thank you.
Sanford, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You both for having a discussion with us this evening. Thank you so much for your time.
And we're now on the assessment results presentations and have an adoption.
No, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, board members. Again, Ms. Turner, and Ms. Perry, please make your way to the microphone. Next, we're gonna have a discussion on the 24-25 BUA and Regents results. Ms. Perry will walk us through the results of last year's student outcomes, and Ms. Turner will conclude with action steps, incentives, initiatives, and interventions that are taking place, that have taken place, and are planning to take place. So without delay, again, Ms. Turner and Ms. Perry, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, President Creedon, Vice President Chirenza, fellow board members, Superintendent Mr. Mott, and members of the Poughkeepsie City School District community. As always, it's an honor, and we thank you for the opportunity to share information in tonight's presentation. I want us to begin by grounding ourselves in our mission to be champions for our scholars by rising to our superintendents, call to action, the urgency of now. But before we focus on our proficiency levels in Poughkeepsie, I wanted to provide a national context using the 2024 data release in January of the National Assessment for Educational Progress. NAEP report is what it's called. Across the country, student performance reflects the challenges that we are collectively facing. So I just wanted to provide you with some numbers. In fourth grade mathematics nationally, students perform at 39% proficient. In fourth grade reading nationally, students perform at 31% proficient. When we move to eighth grade mathematics nationally, our students across the nation are performing at 28% proficient. And again, eighth grade reading is a 30% proficient across the nation. In addition to that, our seniors across the nation are graduating at a 22% proficiency level, ready for college in mathematics, and a 35% reading level. We share this national data to underscore that the patterns we see in Poughkeepsie are not isolated. They are part of a broader national picture, one that schools across the country are working urgently to overcome. And we are walking alongside our fellow colleagues across the nation. So with that context, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mrs. Spencer Perry, Director of Data Assessment and Accountability, who will review our personal assessment results. And then we'll go into the later part of our conversation and presentation about what we're doing here in Poughkeepsie to support our scholars.
Thank you. We're pleased to share with you a visual representation of students achieving proficiency levels of 3 and 4 across the district. This is a comparison from 23-24 to 24-25, specifically for ELA for each school. It's compared against the region as well, which is represented with the green bar. As you can see, we had slight increases for each school with significant increase for Warren. The next slide, please. The same visual representation of proficiency in math. On the left, 23-24, on the right, 24-25. This is a combination of students performing at level 3 and level 4. This slide is a visual representation of all levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 for each school in the elementary prior to reconfiguration. On the left, you see the 4 locations: Lincoln, Krieger, Morrison, Warren. On the right-hand side, you see the new reconfigured style of 3 through 5 schools. This is the distribution of levels for each school. So we have Clinton, Smith, Warren, all organized, so you can see the different levels. This is the same for math. Please be advised that schools, administrators, teachers are looking at gap analysis to help them understand where students demonstrated strength and where they, as a school, have indicated additional support, practice, and STEM would be beneficial. Now we start the sequence with region scores. Again, we have the school or high school compared against the region. The region is comprised of over 100 districts. We believe it's approximately 113. They actually did not have an exact number, but we know it's over 100. So this gives 5 levels. Proficiency, we have a slide a little bit later where it shows the discrete areas of focus. On proficiency is 3, 4, and 5. On the left, you have 23-24, and again on the right, 24-25. To give you a visual representation. To note, the region as well had a dip in ELA success. It was not isolated to the district. The next, algebra. This is specifically focusing on the June algebra region scores. Again, we have the high school to the left, then compared to the region. 24-25. See, we had a dip in our level 3 students. On the right-hand side, you have the region. Region also had challenges with algebra as well. Local history, a slide or 2 later, you're going to get distinct numbers as well as percentages. our global history. We had some nice success in this area. Again, a visual representation. You can see here, that we have, the district compared to the region. We had some nice progress in the area of global history. Then for US history, again, the visual representation where we have, for example, 33.5% level 3 for 23-24 as compared to 24-25, which was 31%. But we did have an increase in level 4. And we did also have an increase in level 5. Level 5 students are excelling at their performance. The next, living environment. Again, 23-24 compared against the region. Then 24-25 compared against the region as well. The next slide gives us a distinct numbers for results for 24-25. As you can see, level 1 indicates knowledge and skills for graduation have not been met. Level 2 results partially meet expectations. This would be, for example, a student on track for a local diploma. Level 3 results partially meet expectations. For regions, diploma purposes. Level 4, those your students whose performance are meeting expectations. Level 5 results on exceeding expectations. Our next slide shows the comparison between the 2 years. This is our group of proficient students. Here you see the change over time. Again, please do keep in mind, English regions was a challenge across the region as well. As was algebra. Algebra was also challenging across the region. We did have a 5.1% jump in global, and a little bit of a jump for US history and living. This is so that, as always, with data presentations, you know the sources of the data in case you ever want to go back or have additional research.
Over the next several, now you've seen an overview of our data. Over the next several slides, we will highlight the district's previous, current, and ongoing efforts to support all our scholars. This work that I'm going to highlight for you now represents the shared commitment of our educators, principals, directors, executive directors, assistant superintendents, superintendent Mott, and this board. It is truly our unity of effort that has driven our progress and will continue to make a difference for our scholars and their families. We wanted to highlight some key initiatives and talk about, if we think about a house as our school, there's a beginning, building a foundation, and then continuing to build upon that foundation and continue to grow. In this first slide, we took a systematic approach and took a look at what has our district done systematically to support our scholars and families. And I won't read the slide to you, but I'll highlight some of the initiatives and based on research and what it says helps remove barriers for kids and provide supports, right? So we know we implemented full day pre-K because we know pre-K is an early intervention, and the faster we get students into school, the better they are supported and have a chance of succeeding. We created busing under the leadership of our superintendent and his team. We have busing for our elementary students. We know attendance matters, and when kids are in buildings and learning in front of kids, they do better and they prosper. We also reconfigured our district. So we have primary centers, intermediate centers, middle school and high school. When we have those centers, your PD, your instruction, your alignment with your colleagues becomes that much stronger because leaders can focus on the developmental level of their students, and colleagues have more opportunities to engage around the specific developmental and learning needs of the students in front of them. As principals and leaders across the system this year, we implemented principal huddles
Those are a rhythm of communication that happens weekly to allow our leadership team to come together to talk about our initiatives, problem solve, decision make, but really become that collective space where we can collaborate together. And we're also focusing on a book study called Results Now. It's by Mike Schmoker. It's leading results and improving outcomes for kids with fast changes, swift changes he talks about. We put innovative labs in our buildings. They're in most of our buildings now. That's to promote project-based learning and things that research says really helps kids become successful. And the common formative assessments, Ms. Perry talked about them a little bit. And I wanted to highlight the work that the principals are doing with their teachers. They're taking those iReady exams. They took the state assessment results. They analyzed with their teams what kids did, what standards students did well on and what they didn't do well on. And then they created what we call standard mastery assessments or comprehensive assessments in that system, specific to the standards that students weren't doing well. So teachers then went and taught to those standards and they're reassessing them and looking at them across the year. And then as we continue to build upon that momentum, you'll see that we're building committees of our colleagues to work alongside us under the leadership of Ms. Woods. She's leading our MTSI Leadership Committee, where she'll be bringing in college leaders and teachers to look at our MTSS district-wide plan. So really focusing on collective effort and shared decision-making so that we move together in a uniform front. Next slide, please. In this slide, we focused on literacy, again, a huge emphasis on building that foundation. So again, under the leadership of our superintendent, the first step was creating a common curriculum, right? We can't move forward if we're all teaching in different directions. So again, that unity of effort around having a common curriculum in grades K through 8. And we brought in Ready Read, and this really was focusing on reading. And then our foundational skills for our students and their leadership of Ms. Woods, really focusing on those foundational skills that our students need because they need to learn how to read before they can read to learn. And so there was a huge emphasis on that. And our academic support teachers really understanding the science of reading. The science of reading isn't a program, it's the science that says how kids are successful. And then we're building upon that, and you can see all the things in the next column over for this year. Ms. Woods is continuing to lead that work with implementing a writing alongside our two primary principals, Ms. O'Connell and Ms. Barrow. And then we have our regional comprehensive support team that comes in from the state, and Mr. Mott and his team last year decided to put that support in our primary buildings because we know if kids can read by the time they start 3rd grade, by the end of 2nd grade, then most likely they'll be successful. We also added a layer of assessment, DIBELS, which assesses foundational skills and also helps us identify specific interventions. Again, our secondary is focusing on mission literacy with a high focus on vocabulary because the research says when students know their vocabulary, they can access what they're reading, right? And then we have a focus on the CKLA dual language curriculum. And we also are piloting a new curriculum in pre-K, which is thematic and helps our students understand concepts and again, build vocabulary. And then you can see we're continuing to research because we want to make sure our students have the best and our teachers have the best resources. So we're continuing to research materials that are evidence-based, high quality. Next slide. Then we go into mathematics. You can see, we know that we had a huge, the literacy slide had a lot more bullets, right? There was a huge focus on literacy because when students read, they do better in every other subject. So we are aware that we need to turn some of that attention to math, but we have done great things already. So again, starting under the leadership of Mr. Mott, we have a common curriculum in mathematics, and in secondary, we focus on IXL. There was a comment around our algebra scores. This team last year looked at those scores and implemented an 8th grade curriculum. You can see it listed there, iReady Classroom Mathematics Algebra 1. That is helping our students understand the mathematics that's needed in algebra. So with the goal of going into high school ready for algebra, right? And you can see on the left side, we're doing a lot of exploration right now. We did put manipulatives in our classrooms last year, that's missing from the side, and we're purchasing manipulatives for middle school now. And the manipulatives for middle school, why? Because we know that when students are having a hard time understanding abstract concepts like mathematics, manipulatives help. Next slide. Then we have instructional leadership. Focused instructional learning walks are not new. They have been in our district before. They were a monthly focus and building level previously. This year, we've enhanced that process. We are focusing on teacher clarity because it has a 0.75 effect size. What does that mean? That means if you really focus on teacher clarity, you can improve student outcomes. It's free, doesn't cost us money. It's really looking at best practices in our teacher pedagogical, our teacher pedagogy really. And then instead of a monthly focus as it was last year, we've moved into weekly building level, weekly division level. So building principals do 10 a week. We are all division leaders, Dr. Palmer and myself, go in on Thursdays to do walks. And then monthly admin, which is new this year, we gather together as an entire district team and visit each building on a monthly basis, go into walks, go into our classrooms, look at the practices around teacher clarity, and then come back and debrief. And then our goal will continue this year as we move along that, where the book study is up there. So we bought books on teacher clarity, and we're also digging into that work as a collective unit. The other thing that's happening is the data, increased data transparency. We have regular reporting updates on attendance, suspension. We're increasing that. We have quarterly data review of iReady results and principal-led data talks that were happening previously. This year, we are implementing a consistent data protocol. The building leaders got together on November 4th, Superintendent's Conference Day. We looked at a couple of data protocols and then chose one we'd like that would match our needs here in Poughkeepsie. And then our principals are leading data talks in their buildings. So they do them with the faculty and they do them with grade level teams. And some are starting to implement one-on-one. So we're growing in that area and domain, and we're gonna just increase our ability to look at data and be transparent about it and talk about what's working and what's not working. And then we added here the counseling piece because this year, under the leadership of Dr. Encarnacion, her and her team are taking a deep dive into the students' needs, doing a career inventory, and her and the counselors look at all the students, especially our seniors. They identify them and the patterns of red, yellow, and green, looking at our students who are high need of interventions, and then they group their students into intervention needs, and they meet with them, and they have an annual goal. Next slide. The next thing we're enhancing or innovating or reinvigorating is our extended learning programming. So last year, our extended learning program has always been academic, not just for fun. So it's to support our students enhancing reading and mathematics. And at the high school, we have credit recovery and Regents prep. This year, we expanded our extended learning to 5 days. So it's Monday through Friday, where before it was 4 days. And we have additional support in reading and mathematics. And right now we're exploring the process of bringing in our CEOs into that program, our community-based organizations, and building those partnerships. We've added some high dosage tutoring. We're piloting it with some students at the high school. And we're just trying to find ways to meet the needs of our students, but in a different way. So the team right now is exploring how can we make extended learning a little different than what happens during the school day, but you're still learning. And I have some final thoughts, but I'll just.
She's almost done.
Yeah, I'm almost done. So I just wanted to say that we think that our Poughkeepsie scholars are capable. Their potential is limitless and their success is non-negotiable. Every strategy that we implement, every adjustment we make, and every difficult decision we lean into is rooted in one truth, that our scholars deserve nothing but the absolute best of us every single day. And with this unity of the board, the superintendent, our leaders, our educators, our family, and our community, we will continue to rise to the urgency of now and ensure that every scholar not only graduates, but thrives. And we just thank you for your trust and your partnership and your shared commitment to the students of Poughkeepsie. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Thank you, Ms. Perry, very much for giving a lot of, I think it was a really nice crowd, which was really great, and also speaking about what's foundation of how we got to this point, what's been implemented, our current initiatives, and looking into the future, what we have planned. Board members, that does conclude this portion of our presentation. Are there any questions?
We're gonna start with Bettina.
I'm wondering whether. I'm gonna speak to the mic, because folks can hear me on the building. I'm wondering whether self-assessments are the most effective way to measure student competencies, or if there are alternative mechanisms that might provide a more accurate and comprehensive evaluation. What other approaches should be considered? I know that we have a compliance to these New York State Ed assessments. But clearly just with your startup, with the percentage being so low nationally, and I've said this on numerous occasions in the past, that doesn't seem like these assessments are really getting at the core of what the gifts and talents that our students have. Are there any other alternative assessments that we can fall back on?
So we're in the process of looking at rubrics and other things that we can do internally. Our MTSS, so any system has multiple measures so that we can have multiple data points across the year to know how our students are proficient. But I think in addition to that, we know our New York State is also in agreement. They've launched New York State Inspires and the new Portrait of a Graduate, which includes different ways of assessing students so that all students have access points to show their brilliance. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. So we're still in the process of making that shift and change, but it's very exciting time. I don't know how it will trickle down to elementary right now, but knowing our chancellor and the vision that he's put forth along with our commissioner, I think that we're in a good place and we're at a pivotal time in education to make those shifts.
Is there a way to use the alternative assessments parallel to you? And I don't do what you do, so I want to start there. Because I don't know what that would look like. But wondering about, while we know that we're shifting into a new direction, how can we preemptively start working on sort of like alternative ways, things that we already use, whether it's the iReady, is there a way that we can set ourselves up for that?
Go ahead.
We currently do use the iReady platform as a measure of students meeting standards in those domains specific to the skills that we've been learning throughout the year. But there are also other ways. There are teacher assessments of how kids are actively engaging themselves in the learning process. There's projects and portfolios, etc. There are multiple means for an educator or a teacher to be able to assess whether a kid has learned the skill or not, and then can plan for the development of the kids if they have not mastered a particular skill. What you are seeing now for state assessments and the end result of the regions is a snapshot, but there are also some factors into those results. I mean, you may have a student, that may sit for a state assessment and, may have a headache, may have had a night that was not, comfortable for them previously, that may impact their thinking, their processing. So it's just a snapshot. It's not the end all be all. There are multiple ways, again, to answer your question, for teachers to assess the readiness of a student that may not be reflected always in the outcome of state assessment.
The new direction of it will be this much more over the state, and the district is getting ahead of it.
The one thing that I will add to those two comments is that because we have multiple measures, when we're looking at students who perform, if their iReady performance is high, right, and the state assessment is low, then we know that's a one-off, because you can't fake good, but you can fake bad, right? And by that, I mean, you could have a bad day, like Mr. Mott said, and you're a high-performing student, but if you're typically along the iReady, which we give 3 times a year, and then in addition to that, we're giving the standards mastery at the building level. If those are all good, then we can stand on 2 solid feet and say this child is doing okay. The state assessment is a one-off. And then now, and we're gonna start moving towards more of the project piece.
I think that's what we're missing in this data. I know you have a compliance to share this with us, and I appreciate all the hard work you have. I'm only one board member, but I'd love to see multiple ways that we're affecting our kids.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, maybe I'm old school, but if you wanna know how to, what works in a district, go to your teachers. They're the ones that work hand on hand with the students. They can be able to tell you who's doing well and who's not doing well, who has a need, who needs to have more assessment. The teachers are your key indicators. Why? Because they're the frontline staff. As Ms. Hawkins said, and I'm just saying, a lot of stuff starts in Wolby. And I agree with Ms. Turner, a child can be doing well in the class according to our district, but the state has standards that, they're implemented, but that doesn't mean that they're always good. So I'm in agreement with, advocating in Albany, because our district is unique to Poughkeepsie, right? It's unique to the needs of our children, not across New York State, because we're Poughkeepsie, we're different. So it starts with advocating, and I have told Ms. Poppin that I will be the first one right there advocating with the teachers for more access and more monies and more funds towards our district. Because if you look at in comparison to other districts, they have certain tools and utilizations that they have that Poughkeepsie doesn't necessarily have access to. So I just want to say start with the teachers first, because they'll be able to tell you which students are lacking. Also, I think in regards to the regions, we definitely need to start a little bit younger. I think the basis should be even at the middle school. We start there, I'm not saying it has to be a lot, but we start implementing certain things so that we can prepare these students for high school. Because the state has such a exemplary, example, we need to start, I think that we need to start there. We're trying to help them with these regions, especially the living environment regions. I mean, that's a very hard region. It really is. So more preparation, structure, guidance, data, that's important. This turn, you're saying how we measure assessments. I wholeheartedly agree with that, being proactive. And the readiness, there's a lot of things that we have to do to get these students prepared to be our next, the future, our next teachers and Ms. Turners and, I forgot your name, I'm sorry, Ms. Perry. There's a lot of things that we need to do, and I've been to convention and I've seen other districts in, on the district school board, and Poughkeepsie we need more resources. I'm gonna be honest with you too, because if we have more of a need, even in regards to poverty, that means we need more funds and we need more allocation and we need more resources. So I thank you, Ms. Turner. I think that that's a great start. But I think that Poughkeepsie, in regards to getting the things and the needs for our children, we're kind of way behind. And in regards to our district, we need more, we just need more. So that's my, I thank you for everything, but I think that it starts here, but we have to finish it off. They have to hear us. I'm done.
Thank you, appreciate your presentation. I'm interested to see, well, I'll start by saying this. When Ms. Hopkins came up for her comments about like standardized tests, if you guys would saw my grades for standardized testing in elementary school. Some of you probably wouldn't have thought I would graduate high school. In elementary school, I tested terribly. But I did well in school, like I did well, my grades were great, but just testing, I just wasn't good at it. And I can, now as an adult, I can attribute a lot of that to my socioeconomic situations at home and things that were occurring at home that affected things that happened at school, but I graduated Poughkeepsie High School 23 out of 241, so it shows that things do change as time goes on, and I think these numbers will eventually and hopefully they'll increase. You guys know my biggest thing is literacy. It's always gonna be literacy. It's always gonna be addressing literacy across the board in the community. So yeah, I'm hoping we can, invest a lot more in literacy. Mainly because of the numbers that I'm seeing, like the encouragement of the US history and global history numbers. I'm also a nerd and very invested in global politics and civic duty, and I think those two courses help our young people in this anti-intellectual age that we're in, who get their information from Facebook and Twitter or X or Truth Social or whatever, wherever they get their information to make like political decisions. Yeah, I would like to see just more focus on literacy, more civic engagement, especially with our high school students who are going to be graduating and becoming voters in the next few years. So, but other than that, I'm hopeful that the district will continue to move forward in a positive way. Hopefully, the reconfiguration will show this positive change. I'm also curious to see what the numbers, or I'm curious to know what the past during that government shutdown, right? Where we're in a community that is stricken with poverty and, people without SNAP benefits, and how were the kids affected during that time period? I want to see like if, kids were coming to school hungry, how did they affect their grades, or how did that affect their behavior in school? It'd be interesting, maybe just as a project to see like how things like government shutdowns affect our education system. I always say that the easiest way or the basics is feeding a kid, making sure they come to school fed is going to be the first way to make sure that they're learning and things like that. You're hungry, you don't have breakfast, the first 5 hours of school is going to be miserable until you have lunch, and then the rest of your day may be well. So I'm always interested in seeing like how food insecurity affects education. Other than that, kudos, Dr. Turner, Mrs. Turner, sorry. Keep working with the principals, the teachers. I think they do need support. I think we have a good team. But I'll leave it there. Civics.
We actually have a seal of civic readiness that we're developing.
Got it.
And so we're working on that.
Yeah, and we need some local officials. Let's open here from the state on down. Let's get in here in the classrooms and schools. One thing I do remember doing in high school was a mock election during the presidential election, and during the mayoral election, and during learning about our state senators and our assemblymen and what they do. So things like that I think would be fun, and we'll engage them and prepare them. Bob is coming from. Thank you.
Our closing statements for the question.
Okay, I have just a couple comments and a couple specific questions. My first comment is about the success at Mooring. It's hard to ignore it when you see this data and you're trying to make sense of all of it. That obviously stands out. So I just wanted to give the leadership at Mooring kudos, because they haven't had any of these changes that have been implemented. I mean, they know they're doing a great job, but it's evidence that leadership matters as well, that trickles down. So there is an opportunity to study that and to replicate it in other schools. So that's something I saw from the data. I had a question about busing for extended learning time. I know that some of the elementary students who participate in extended learning time previously were covered under the new busing, but if they do ELT, they no longer qualify for evening transportation. I wonder if there's a way to look at that. And then I had a question about innovation, the innovation labs. I know we have them, but what specifically are we doing in them? And is there any intentional curriculum or staffing in those spaces?
So I could address that. Dr. Bisbee, under her leadership, she has developed and working alongside the principals, identified specific kind of makerspace or innovation materials that go into those spaces, technology infused. There's not a curriculum per se right now, and then we have professional development coming in under the leadership of Ms. Woods, specific to the innovation labs. And then, like I said, we've been working on and have approved to go into an MOA agreement for a person to oversee that as an additional assignment, to help work on those. And we'll just continue looking at it and developing it, but really maker spaces are designed for students to go in and really be those innovative thinkers, creative thought process, do design thinking, stuff like that in those spaces.
Project Boost,
Yeah.
And we want to see that, but it's hard if there's no person in charge of it. It's hard for it to authentically just occur.
Right,
So that would
that's
be
why
my
we
concern.
have the point person that it's just time that it takes to develop those things out.
And I didn't know if anyone had any feedback on the busing or extended learning
I
time.
think it's a cost, associated cost.
I didn't hear your question when Mr. Green was speaking with.
But yeah, no, I was asking about busing. So I know busing was a
For
big
extended learning.
busing was a big thing that we were offering to many elementary school students, but many of those same elementary school students are now participating in ELT where they no longer qualify for busing in the afternoon. So I know some families are gonna miss out on those extended learning opportunities because they don't have a way to get there. I guess that's what it's.
It is an initiative we're exploring, so I want to answer it that way. We are exploring. Fine, that's basically. Thank you. Sorry.
I waited my time. I will say, on some of the charts for the 5 levels, the high school one, I'm gonna just say when in 2 weeks, I'll go out and I'll pull up the charts from New York State, will be out there. And if we could try and make the formats look similar, because they won't, all right? And their formats I find a little easier to read, such as they add 4 through 5, 4, 3 together and say proficient, us, and the rest of the state. So, because that's a lot of ways that the parents are gonna, and the community is gonna see it, and these, having the 5 cubes, 5 pillars, we're trying to look at, were they really doing better in history than, the one that everybody has problems for, the environment, and you couldn't tell when you look at visually when you look, so that's a comment. When I looked at it, the last page, we almost said measurements, because we're sitting up here and we don't have our measurements crystallized for the district. And I realized the reports cards went out today, am I correct? For the high school. And as a board, and you talked about looking at the measurements here, the different measurements, but we need that to sign up for these to track our progress, just like you, we have to be the voice for the community. And right now, it's still somewhat a black hole moving forward. What are the key measures? Can be attendance, can be progress versus achievement. But give us something, because we're well into the time and don't know, have a moving target for accountability. And I like what we had a previous speaker, and a lot of back to the pre-pandemic and New York State's approach to this whole thing. It's fairly open for debate when you look at the results of Mississippi. All right, back to your point on the map and across the board. And that resembles what I had in a religious school in third grade, more than what we're presenting our kids with today, back with, and how we go and walk through some of those paths and really happen. But the real thing is, whenever it come up, we had 25 pages of what we're doing. And we didn't have one little peek at how we're gonna measure. So we have to hold ourselves accountable. Our staff wants accountability to themselves, they just wanna make sure we're picking the right thing. And yes, maybe a little consistency when the state charts come out, which will be sometime in November, right? That's the promise. And just having the public learn one, and you know, did we reach out to the parents for a report card? I know we have the parents teachers number, but did we at least do something to tell them how to read the report card? You know, that or something that just came out. I don't see it in the superintendent's, David. Report card was out.
Yeah, would they be mailed out?
Yeah.
They would keep their teacher comment.
Okay,
Or
so
middle school.
for the middle school, but for,
It's for the whole district this week.
yeah, that's. I was in the high school when the child was, a student was begging for the report card. For the week, but that's all, just always think a measurement going forward, how we go. Hold ourselves accountable,
Thank you.
you know, and with that said. We are thank you.
No, thank you, Ms. Turner, thank you, Ms. Perry, very much for your efforts. We can give them a round of applause for. Taking the detail of the Mr. President, that includes the workshop topic session for this evening.
And then you're up for superintendent's comments.
Well, it's good timing. Thank you, Mr. Beatty, for this opportunity. I want to also see the data from previous school year, but I still want to thank all of our teachers, all of our principals, all of our assistant principals, all of our faculty and staff who work daily diligently to prepare students for the next day. So I do want to say just that, as some teachers in the audience, and I do want to mention that, even, I want to score that I didn't mention some of the teachers at the last, board meeting regarding the reconfiguration and the patience they went through to pack up their classrooms and transition to new locations, so, I do see you, hear you, and understand, it's appreciation to all teachers, so, if those who are not watching, make sure those are hearing the message, and Mr. Mott mentioned that he does appreciate the efforts. But I do want to make sure we underscore that we are where we are, but we wouldn't be where we are without the teachers and faculty and staff. So with that said, I want to say thank you very much, and let's continue to try to build on our successes that we currently have. Also want to mention tomorrow was our final day for parent-teacher conference. 2 buildings tomorrow, the high school and the primary buildings, half day for those 2 buildings only. So parents, please reach out to your. It's our. Right, it's in the high school and the primary buildings, the 2 primary buildings. So 3 buildings total. I understand. I understand you coming from. Finally, I want to say happy Thanksgiving. This is our last board meeting before our Thanksgiving break. Wishing all of our families a happy Thanksgiving, a safe Thanksgiving, a time to reflect and spend time with your families and loved ones. So with that said, Mr. Green, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
I'm gonna mix it up a little. Tina, are you ready to send final comments?
I would just like to, appreciate, extend my appreciation for the presentations that were done today. The grants audit was something that had been requested. Was pleased to see that it's come to its finality. We learned from it, and most importantly, the corrective action plan that was put, the business office clearly had put some well thought in how to remediate some of the concerns that were presented. And as an individual board member, that's what I want to hear. The instructional team, just a phenomenal job. You didn't just present the data with regards to the assessment, but you clearly laid out, here's what we've already been doing that is evidence-based, that we are continuing to develop, and here's some gaps, here's our game plan, moving forward. I do agree with Eleanor's, comment that, and I'm sure that our instructional team does this, is partnership with teachers. I mean, we have such phenomenal teachers in our district, we're really lucky to have them. I had the pleasure of engaging with our board president during the conference, and, we had a conversation about Heidi. It was so interesting to hear him say, you need big Heidi, a little Heidi. And I was like, really, I'm happy. Because I highlighted, Ms. Murphy as being just, one of our, blue ribbon teachers in this district. We're really lucky to have her with us. And
We love you.
Thanks for your kids. Thanks for your kids.
my kid just made it on the basketball team, and I know you know he wanted that. So I just found that out today. The other thing I want to make mention, is that I think we still have to work on developing our partnerships with families and our parents. I was discouraged to meet a parent who lives, quite a distance. I won't get into the nuances of her circumstance, the parent's circumstance, because it's not my business to share other people's personal business, neither should you. But it is pretty significant. Some significant events that they just recently experienced. They're new to Poughkeepsie. And in the circumstances for which they reached Poughkeepsie, our community did not embrace this family. The parent came to the school to drop off, something that was essential for them, for the activity they were engaging in. And they had to wait from 2 p.m. till 7 p.m. in the cold from 3 days ago. It was temperatures were pretty dip low. And her commitment was to make sure that her child went back to their home safely, walking, I would say, estimate 2 miles away. And so, I was disappointed to hear that she was not welcome into the building or even checked on. Hey, are you okay? You're standing outside for the number of hours that they were standing out for. So just sharing that story, because I think we deserve to do better, because there is no partnership like the families that we engage in.
I'll be fast. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone. That I would also like to, I was invited on Tuesday next week, the 25th, to Sojourner Truth Elementary School, to participate in Balloons Over Broadway. I may or may not be dressed as a turkey. I may or may not be the pardon turkey for the city. I may or may not. You have to come to find out. That's pretty much it. I will say, Mrs. Murphy, I'm so sorry. I've been, since September, I've been coming to these, I've been part of the board, sitting in these meetings, looking out the crowd, and saying, she was really, really familiar, really familiar. It wasn't until just now that I realized that you were my PACE teacher in 5th grade and 6th grade, and PACE was such an amazing program at the Kingston Middle School.
That's very crispy.
Yeah, that was Miss Kristen during that time. PACE was a great program, and I remember traveling from Warren Elementary School on a small little short bus to Poughkeepsie Middle School during the day, taking time, learning what it was going to be in middle school, doing some fun things, doing some fun little projects, and then going back to school super excited. So those types of programs, I think we need to bring back, right? I think we need to introduce these students to the middle school earlier. At that time, 8th grade, we were taking living environment in 8th grade, taking the Regents in 8th grade. I like having preparation for the next step. And programs like PACE was one of those programs that prepared me for middle school, at a time where I didn't know what was gonna happen when I got to middle school. So those things, I always go back to those type of programs because that's really the foundation of where we are, and where I am today. And that's really what helped me on that. In high school, I had teachers, Mr. Zenkley, Mr. Daniels, Ms. Nichols. Those teachers are the reason why I study history. Those are the people who laid the foundation and embedded those things inside me, right? So I'm so invested in civics. I'm so invested in literacy. It's the people I forget to. It's the teachers here in the district. They were really invested in us. Mrs. Mann would come to my house if I acted up. So those type of things are what I like to see in the city. Like we were talking about earlier, bringing back people from the community into the district to actually take part. They know the students, they know the parents. A lot of times they talk to parents. I know a lot of the parents because I went to school with a lot of parents. Kind of embarrassing that I'm not a parent yet and everyone else got, teenage kids. But yeah, those kind of programs, I always go back to and think about, really, really shape how I performed in school and really laid the groundwork for my success in school. So yeah, those things. Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you for everyone's presentations tonight. I just wanted to say that I see just across academics and operations that I do see everyone is working very hard. Everyone is very serious about improvement. There are a lot of bright spots to be seen, but we still are lacking consistent and stable district-wide systems that can turn individual successes into scalable outcomes. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all the work, all the changes that are being made will translate into student success. So thank you.
I just want to say, I agree with all of the board members, Jamar, let me know about the turkey as a journey. I'll be honest, I love the school. Today Krieger had, Miss, Lorraine, they had a Crunch Fitness, the gym came to the school like Krieger. That's amazing because it's about bringing the community in, right? Fitness, right? We all are getting up there and we want to just do the best, but that was just so cool to have the family come in. I didn't get a chance to make it, but she did send me the flyer. And Dr. Scott had an adult college at Clinton. And it's where the parents came together to learn different workshops and they won prizes and he also fed them. That costs money, to do these things, but again, bringing the community together. They had a pantry at the middle school for the issues the government shut down. So the community, the school is trying to work in conjunction with the community. Friday night lights, Saturday night lights we have to build trust within the community. So I just want to thank everybody, thank the district, one day at a time. We're gonna make Poughkeepsie great. It's gonna be a great district. We just gotta keep believing in our students because they're the future.
I want to make one more comment, but I neglected to mention the work that the teachers have stuff led by leadership in the audience today. Food drive, at every building. I saw some pictures today. I've seen a Facebook website of all of the food that's been donated by our teachers and support staff. So I wanted to just say to the captains, Ms. Tyler, Ms. Murphy, thank you for your leadership in that endeavor. I'm sure our community is very grateful for it. Thank you very much again, Mr.
I'd like to go, since some people went back to the future, I'd like to go back to the future. In the 70s, there was a real thrust for teaching students how to understand media. All right. And everybody, if you went to school, then there was a real push. So they could read a newspaper, discern truth from fact on their own, and we actually taught, this may shock you, we taught people how to do that. One could wonder, that's a back to the future moment. And so that's my time travel for you. I also went to the Chamber of Commerce with our superintendent. And I want to bring back, like, Does anybody from the chamber listen? You know, I sort of say, oh, it's Chamber of Commerce, rubber chicken, everybody. There was so many people who cared about the community, our children, the whole. It was geared toward not-for-profit, and I was really realized that it's more than just the kids, it's really about the community. And the chamber really reflected that back to us and back to community memory. I knew a few more people than Greg now, or at least knew their predecessors, but that was really good and they're really supportive and we just I also in years ago, but we have to find ways where people can easily help us. We just really have to design it, whether it's the can collection, or what we're doing for toys, or we have to make it easy for people to join our community and not feel as outliers. Be it language, but be it that, and we just have to continue to do that. And let's see. I also, for self-correction, I helped one of our staff who was interviewing people for her PhD candidate paper. And she asked what the school board does. What do we do? What do we do? And it really made me sit back and reflect. It's not an easy answer, I didn't forget about the taxpayers. But we, a lot of times, forget about the taxpayers, and so that was introspective between the Chamber of Commerce, that it was very introspective and look at what our real mission is on the board. And lastly, for numbers, I went and I saw that, not to downplay other elementaries, I saw the Warren schools test scores. Do you know they have the largest proportion of inexperienced teachers in the district? It's like 17%. And which I don't know what that means. You can all interpret it in whatever way you want, enthusiasm, or the kids can relate to them. However you look at it, it was just an interesting thing to look at, because typically your first intention is the school of the least seniority, highest turnover will be last, and for shout out to Warren, they're not. All right, and with that, everybody, can I see a show of hands? Who's cooking? Who's doing takeout? All right, so happy Thanksgiving and have a great holiday. Thank you. Now I have to say, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? For the record, we're 8:44. A little over.
Motion to close.